welcome to this week's Troubleshooting with Jay. So this week I just want to talk about different buffers, different shapes, sizes, grits, all that, because sometimes we get a lot of confusion in our showroom about the different types of buffers and what we use them for. But first of all, I want to say it does come down to personal preference. So because that's the reason why there are so many shapes and sizes and different grits, because people like to work with different grits. The other thing is that I really encourage you to look at hygienic standards when it comes to files and file maintenance. In fact, you know, when you can buy a single wrapped file like this for the same price as another one, this is the Cuccio natural nail file that are individually wrapped. Just think about how much that looks amazing to your client when she comes to the table and you unwrap it and it's just for her. So then she has a lot more confidence in you for hygiene. It's not very nice to go and realise that somebody's got a very used old buffer with old file grit. It's kind of funky. The other thing that you can do is use our beautiful Cuccio individual stainless steel files. This one's a used one, I just wanted to show you, and then you just take off the file paper in front of the client. Always do it in front of the client, and then pop on a new one. You just stick it onto the surface, and that comes in 3 different grits. And they are really, really cost effective. So it ends up working out being a really good solution for you and your client. And also it's nice to use a brand new file. Of course, if we're using brand new files, make sure you've got an old, daggy old file that you can just season the edges, because these, when they're new, they're really super sharp, and next thing you know, you file the nail and blood. Nobody wants that, because then we have to deal with a whole plethora of things when we're dealing with blood flow. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to talk about the different shapes. So there's this kind of shape, there's this shape, there's a harbour bridge shape, then you have the little block buffers, and again, it all comes down to personal preference. When I'm doing sidewall filing, I need to make sure that I have a thin file that is very straight so that I can get straight side edges. And I personally like this shape for my hand filing, because I like the round edge for the cuticle work, and then the straight edge for the sidewalls. So that I like this one. And then it comes down to the paper and the grit on the paper. A lot of people don't understand. We get lots of people that get very confused between the grits. So I thought I would get out my handy dandy marker and just draw on the board how it works. So basically it comes from sandpaper. And so every inch of sandpaper, there are a certain number of particles. So in 180 grit sandpaper or 180 grit file, there are 180 little particles in a square inch. And that means that that file is kind of medium grit. So that's a medium. So if we have 100 grit file, can you see that okay? I hope you can see it okay. Then there's only 100 of these things. And so there's more surface area, so it's a bumpier file. And so that is a coarse file. And then say you've got a 400 grit file. This one has loads of grits. I'm such a good drawer. And so the surface area is very, very fine. And so that's a fine file. So I hope that makes sense, because a lot of people, you know, get confused, especially when they're starting out, of which file is which grit. So generally speaking, you would use a 240 grit file for natural nails. You would use 180 grit for finishing, taking product down, prior to gel. You'd use 100 grit file only for removing bulk of product and taking length down. Anything above 400 is going to buff it, so it's going to bring it to a nice smooth surface. And then something like this, our high shine buffers, these are usually around about, I want to say 600, and then they move right up to 1200. So like this doesn't even have grit, but it's so super duper smooth that it brings it up to a super high shine. So the other thing is that in our industry we have a standard, and that is a block buff. The cool part about block buffs is that they come in all different grits. So this Goldie one is about a 400 grit file, and we use that. This is the one I use after powder polish. It's so smooth and awesome, and I love it. It's very, very fine. And then they range up. Some of these are really coarse. This is a 100 grit file with a purple inside. You can usually tell, this is one of my favourites lately, even though it's only 3-sided. I'm not sure why it's three-sided. The cool part about a block buff is that it's easy to get in. They flex so that you can go in a very different round, and they're just kind of a handy staple. They're not so easy to clean, but they're also quite inexpensive. The other thing that we do in preparation is that we have these little individual mini white blocks. So you can see there that we use these to remove the shine from the natural nail, and they're one use only. So there are a million files, and there's not one file to skin a cat, but I hope that this little file info session helped. And if you've got any questions, please write them below or reach out. And please like and share, and I shall see you next week. Lots of love.